Back in late 2021, a certain streaming service hosted a foreign language television series that proved very popular here in the United States. During that time, a voice artist I admire made a joke on social media about how attractive people probably only watched the dubbed version of the show. The obvious meaning was that if you're good looking, you're probably too dumb to want to read and won't bother with subtitles. They were clearly making fun of the most oppressed of us in human society: sexy people. Though sexy people didn't complain about the joke, sadly, as is often the case when it comes to anything taking place online, criticism came from so far out of nowhere it had Courage the Cowardly Dog's bite marks on it. In this case, our voice artist was accused of attacking their fellow actors. Their accuser was someone whose job it was to record English dialogue for foreign shows. Despite no apology being needed, our voice artist took the high ground by clarifying the obvious meaning of the original joke and apologized for inadvertently hurting the feelings of any dubbing performers. Of course, a sincere apology is never enough for people on a crusade, and another dubbing performer with a reasonably large following on social media said the response wasn't good enough and demanded a more thorough apology. So why all this hate from people who record English dialogue for foreign media? Why would they instantly have their hackles up over something so petty? Why would they paint themselves as victims when no one else made the connection? My guess is professional resentment or even jealousy, because unlike many voice artists beloved by their fans, those who do voice dubbing are often not respected by many who watch anime. And if you know anything about the anime community, those who don't like something aren't the kind to sit back and simply let it go. By the way, this video focuses on dubbed anime, but applies equally to live-action films and television. There has been a long-running debate between those who prefer shows with subtitles versus those who would rather listen to new audio recorded in their native language. Subs versus dubs. I'm going to be as kind as I can, but as the title of this video says, I'm not a fan of dubbed performances and would rather read 2 hours of subtitles than listen to dialogue that, to my ears, often sounds like an overeager kindergarten teacher reading a story to their students before nap time. It was during the course of this social media kerfuffle that I came to an uncomfortable understanding of my own prejudice against dubbed performances and the realization that they take an awful lot of work and talent to produce just for like me to complain about them. The entertainment industry, like every industry, has a clear hierarchy. At the top, you have your A-list actors and directors, then the producers, followed by all the rest until you get to the off-camera vocal talent. Many of us Western voiceover nerds can identify a given actor's performance like a sommelier identifying the year and vineyard of an expensive red wine. Oh, that's a vintage Billy West from the Spumco years. It has a light Philip J. Fry bouquet with just a hint of Zoidberg. We often even know the faces of the mostly anonymous performers and follow them on social media or line up to get their autographs at conventions. So it's difficult for people like us to accept that Hollywood doesn't give a damn about the people who bring to life our favorite animated characters. Even the union that represents voice actors frequently fails to aggressively negotiate during occasional strikes, usually giving in to the studios with barely any of their demands met. Hell, for as long as cartoons have been around, voice actors often went uncredited or had their credits lumped together as a group with everyone who did a voice on the show for the entire season, whether it was a main cast member or someone who merely voiced a background character in a single episode. It wasn't until the early 1990s that it became mostly standard for studios to give cartoon actors proper credit. Now imagine being treated even lower than that on the entertainment totem pole, and it's easy to understand why you might be so ice cream headache sensitive that you would immediately lash out at any reference to your profession that sounds even slightly negative. Localization is when a media product from one region is reworked so it can be more easily consumed in another with a separate language and cultural identity. In anime, localization is a much better term to use than translation because what usually happens when bringing a show from Japan to a Western country is more than simply converting the language. A very heated debate already exists when it comes to localization, and I won't get into it here because at times it makes the United States Civil War look like Elmo's public feud with the pet rock. Yes, we know all about the onigiri and sailors Uranus and Neptune. Apart from simply translating the Japanese language, localization also includes finding a way to convey Japanese concepts and idioms so they can be understood by a Western audience without interrupting the flow of the story. For example, a Japanese character might complain about his nagging wife with dialogue that directly translates as, "My wife complains so much, it has given me calluses in my ears." This expression would be odd for English speakers unfamiliar with most Japanese idioms. The meaning behind "getting calluses in my ears" is that the listener has heard something so much that it built up a callus inside their ear, like a farm worker developing hard lumps of skin on their hands during harvest season. If you think about it, that idiom does make sense, but if you're in the middle of watching a show and an unfamiliar expression comes up, the time it takes for your brain to interpret the meaning could interrupt the flow of the story. Thus, when translated into English, the dialogue would likely be changed to, "My wife is talking my ears off." Furthermore, unlike the minor differences between languages such as English, French, and Spanish, Japanese grammar rules are often different enough from Western syntax that it's common for a translated piece of dialogue to vary greatly in length. What might take 2 seconds to say in Japanese could take 5 seconds in English, so those writing the localization script have to find a quicker way to convey the same meaning as the original, otherwise the audio will quickly get out of sync with the video. This isn't something you notice when watching a subtitled version of a show because our brains read faster than we speak, but if you have the option to listen to a dubbed performance while at the same time reading the subtitles created from the original Japanese translation, it can be very obvious. Generally speaking, traditional animation is comprised of 3 steps when dealing with dialogue: writing the script, recording the dialogue, animating the characters, including making the lip movements match the recorded dialogue. When it comes to producing a dubbed version of a show, this process is out of order because they start with what is usually the last stage and work backward under conditions the original production didn't have. To prepare a dubbed version of a show, you start with the animated footage, then you translate the original material while retaining both the meaning and length of the original dialogue as close as possible, then you record the dialogue with the new actor trying to match the already rendered lip movements as much as possible. Speaking of things that come in threes, a popular expression for engineers is cheap, fast, or good. Pick 2. The meaning of which is for the manufacturing of any given product, one of those 3 options has to be sacrificed. If you want a product cheap and fast, it won't be any good. If you want it cheap and good, it'll take a long time to produce. If you want it good and fast, it's going to cost you. Those dubbing anime face a similar triangular dilemma. Cheap, stick to the script while matching the lip movements, or provide a good performance. Pick 2. Unfortunately, dubbing anime almost always means working with a limited budget, so cheap is almost always one of the 2 choices. That leaves the remaining choice between either sticking to the script and matching the lip movements, or giving a good performance. And not a lot of dubbing performers can do both, which explains why so many of us can't stand dubbed anime. I want to stress that we should absolutely not fault the performers because it's not easy to do. Dubbing anime boils down to what is essentially ADR. ADR, or automated dialogue replacement, is a production technique used in almost every film when dialogue is re-recorded in a studio to replace what was captured at the time of filming, whether due to sound recording issues or to get rid of background noise. While this sounds easy enough, it can actually be tricky to match the lip movements and tone of voice, even for the original actor who has the advantage of replacing themselves. Trying to overdub a completely different actor's performance in a completely different language can take a lot of effort, even for seasoned veterans. It should also be mentioned that dialogue that reads just fine on paper can be cumbersome to say out loud when the time comes. For one of my amateur videos, I spent anywhere from 10 to 20 hours writing, editing, and practicing my script. And even then, during recording, there might be a line that sounded great on every read-through, but just cannot be easily spoken, and I'll have to improvise a replacement on the spot. Actors do this all the time, and not being tied down to a script allows for choosing different words to make a performance sound much more natural. Unfortunately, when your script is written to not only match a given amount of time, but also to match established lip movements as much as possible, the performer has little to no leeway to adjust their dialogue, and their performance will usually suffer accordingly. Ultimately, not only is the entire subs versus dubs debate petty, but as anime fans, regardless of our preferences, we should be happy that something we love is being embraced by so many, because as the demand for a product rises, studios will work that much harder to provide us what we love so much. Compared to the 1980s, Western anime fans are living in a golden age of opportunity, and we should encourage anything that brings more people to our fandom, not gatekeep over the preferred method of consuming the media. It is important to note that people with vision issues obviously can only enjoy a dubbed performance, but the point of this video isn't to address accessibility to foreign media, but rather the preference between two options by the majority audience. In the end, I suppose this video is less about how dubbed anime isn't that bad, and more an appeal for those who prefer subtitles to stop being so mean.
Why is it so mean?
This is, in effect, my apology to all the dubbing actors I've maligned over the course of my anime fandom. I only hope I didn't give anyone any ear calluses. Oh, that's a Billy West from the Spumco years. It has a light Philip J. Fry bouquet with just a hint of Zoidberg. That's enough overacting. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. There's more content on my channel, including other films that didn't age well, and a whole bunch of Scooby-Doo related stuff.